Welcome to the 6-8 Culture Podcast, an international community where we share stories of transformation and restoration from the inside out, based on justice, kindness, and humility. I'm your host, Rob McKinley. Well, welcome to our inaugural episode where I'll be unfolding who we are, what we're about, and why we exist. This platform is to be a venue to both inspire and to be inspired, a lens, if you will, that will form a positive vantage point to a world in a state of deep chaos. 6-8 Culture is an apolitical, nonpartisan movement where the endgame is organic, positive, macro change. But that's the end game. The MO to get there is being wholly transformed from the inside out on a micro level. This initial podcast is an op-ed format, but all future podcasts are interviews. Interviews of fascinating people. Our guests will include NGO leaders and workers, speakers, authors, behind-the-scenes people that have made indelible marks, pastors, everyday people, and both subversive and extroverted world changers. I can assure you that our guests are anything but static. You may find yourself drawn into their praxis and work. Each guest will have a corresponding link to either themselves or their associated organizations where you can be inspired from their ways of expressing justice, kindness, and humility. More on that to come. But for now, welcome to 6-8 Culture. Tribalism, leftists, rightists. Is there a better way? It's been said to set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. When I was a young teenager, I was involved with the punk rock scene in Victoria, British Columbia. We were a raucous bunch, anti-establishment, anti-globalization. We questioned everything. Contrary to our look, there were a surprising amount of intellects among us. Many of these kids were working out their teenage angst by attending punk gigs, slam dancing, writing music, and abusing themselves with substances. There were also other sides to this madness. Most, were philosophically astute, geopolitically aware beyond the narrative of the day, and keenly aware of both gross injustices locally and internationally. Many were 5 to 10 years ahead of their high school peers that eventually came to question these societal norms and work out their own angst later on in their college years. We would have been categorized as far left on the political spectrum. Even as late as 1999, there were raging anti-globalization protests that led to riots in Seattle, mostly championed by those on the left. My oh my, how the tables have turned. This op-ed isn't about right versus left, though. It's about losing our footing on what is just, what is kind, and living it all out in humility. As we look around us, we're rapidly becoming the animals of Animal Farm, with each of us acting as his or her own little Napoleon. Are we confused yet? Right has become left and left has become right. Pro-globalists are now considered left. What is now considered extreme right would have been labeled centrist a couple of decades ago. What is now called extreme left would have been labeled fascist, treason, or dystopian fiction just a couple of decades ago. Antifa, ironically, utilizes fascist tactics through shaming, silencing, censoring, and violence. So much for anti-fascism. We have political spin doctors weaving narratives that make our blood boil, regardless of one's political leanings. Watching CNN and Fox simultaneously, you would swear there are two different worlds. We have global corporations like Google and Facebook fulfilling Orwell's no longer cryptic dystopian future through censorship and political nepotism. Silicon Valley's fact checkers and community standard czars have been given power positions akin to Joseph McCarthy, Tokyo Rose, and Joseph Goebbels. In our media-saturated world, fact largely corresponds with narrative and political nepotism rather than truth. We also have an international community that almost solely sees America through the lenses of CNN. For those who have done significant international travel, you can attest to this. Every airport, and I mean every airport that I've traveled to this past decade internationally, which are many and most in global south countries, pump a constant deluge of CNN. Nothing else. We have those who subscribe to the powers that be, the WHO, heads of state, without question. Anyone that presents contrary facts is labeled a conspiracy theorist, even when these same leaders do a 180-degree shift within days. We do have conspiracy theorists in our midst. We also have those who have accepted that we live in a narrative media-saturated society with enough wisdom to recognize that blindly following certain agendas will lead to gross injustices for future generations. On the flip side, we also have complicity theorists, people who accept the political narrative of the day unquestionably, consume mainstream media like it was 1980, and are prone to submissiveness and outbursts of irrational fear, all whilst reveling in the public shaming of free thinkers. So whatever categories we are labeled into, left, right, conspiracy theorist, or complicity theorist, one thing has happened over the past few decades. There has been a parabolic shift in what these definitions now mean. Left and right are merely semantics. Definitions have changed, but the games remain the same. So what goal are we as humans striving towards? Ultimately, no matter the worldview, most of us would love to see our world more just, kinder, and more humble. As C.S. Lewis translated humility, not just thinking less of myself, but thinking of myself less. This is where the 6-8 culture movement comes in. Sustainable change is concerned with both the fruit of the individual and the collective whole. Both are interdependent. Identity politics have done nothing but perpetuate greater division. Injustice, censorship, and propaganda are unfolding faster than we can keep up with. In almost unprecedented rapidity, we have witnessed practically everything turned upside down. Is some of it good? Absolutely. Much of it isn't. Right has become wrong. Wrong has become right. Right has become, well, left. I'm reminded of Bob Dylan's song, "Everybody's Talking, Nobody Told Me." Grouped together, the lyrics go like this: everybody's talking and no one says a word. Everybody's smoking and no one's getting high. Everybody's flying and never touch the sky. Everybody's flying and no one leaves the ground. Everybody's crying and no one makes a sound. Strange days indeed, most peculiar, mama. Well, there's an upcoming election in the States in about 7 weeks. Sparks will fly. People will lose friends. Riots will continue. Facebook will turn into a battleground. The perennially offended will reach offense overload. Agitators will agitate. And at the end of it all, an imperfect human will assume control of the, quote, most powerful office on earth, unquote. Some will be gracious in defeat, others will have put all their hope in one of two very imperfect men and do drastic things to themselves or others. Tribalism will wreak havoc and people will clamor for their king. May I suggest a better way? Can we focus this energy on setting ourselves in order before attempting to change the world through opinion and projection? Now, I'm speaking to myself as much as to anyone else. Can we do our utmost daily to act in ways of justice, in mercy and kindness, all clothed in humility? But on a micro, not macro level, our daily interactions, how we treat others and how we treat ourselves. After returning from a trip to some of the most impoverished regions of Brazil in 2014, I got a tattoo of a scripture that speaks of acting justly, loving mercy, and walking humbly. These very words were written 2,700 years ago in the Middle East, during a time of cultural chaos not unlike ours today. In keeping with Einstein's quote that insanity is doing the same thing over and over with the expectation of a different result, as humans, we don't seem to learn very well. The players have changed, but the screenplay remains the same, generation after generation. Maybe it's high time to rewrite the play. This theme has been consuming my thoughts for some time now, broken down to 6 words: act justly, love mercy, walk humbly. These 6 words are the catalyst behind this podcast and this movement. I'm reminded of the beginning of Dallas Willard's book, The Divine Conspiracy, where he speaks of a pilot who was soaring and then nosedived straight down into the ground, unaware that he'd been flying upside down the entire time. Our world is upside down. We all have a choice to be part of the solution. That solution won't be found on November 3rd in the White House, the WHO, rightist militias, the UN, or any other external entity. It's found and cultured within us. I'm not saying our votes and professions don't count. They do. But sustainable macro change cannot thrive until it's lived out and focused daily on a micro level. Justice, mercy or kindness, humility. To quote a good friend, we are called to be the recipients of change, not just the agents of it. After working and traveling in numerous global South countries, as well as witnessing our own societal maladies here at home in Canada, the theme that continued to present itself is that we all suffer from 3 afflictions. Each and all transcend culture and ethnicity: injustice, inhumanity, and entitlement. Our human expressions are often that of projection outside of ourselves. Leaders must change. Organizations must change. Governments must change. We demand change. We protest. We riot. Yet any substantive and enduring change is rarely accomplished this way. Significant transformation can only begin within ourselves. The call to humanity 2,700 years ago still rings true today: to act justly, to love mercy or kindness, and to walk in humility. This is 6-8 culture, the seed from which we began, organic, prevailing, transformative. The 6-8 Culture podcast is a conduit of sharing 6-8 culture stories. As I alluded to earlier, I will be interviewing people from around the world, from Cambodia to Bolivia, from Brazil to Ethiopia, from the Philippines to Canada, and all points between. So join us on this journey, in this movement. Our podcasts are scheduled to be put out on a consistent basis. These are interviews of people that are creating sustainable, positive transformation in the world through first changing themselves in ways of justice, kindness, and humility. You'll find stories of inspiration and a lot of great stories of humor that will entertain you as well. A question though, can justice and kindness or mercy coexist? When a wrong is committed against us, we want justice. When we commit wrongs against others, we want mercy. Only through humility can our subjective inclinations for true justice and mercy thrive. The three are very interdependent with one another. I'll leave you with a quote on justice, on mercy, and on humility. Here's what Alexander Solzhenitsyn said about justice. In keeping silent about evil, in burying it so deep within us that no sign of it appears on the surface, we are implanting it, and it will rise up 1,000-fold in the future. When we neither punish nor reproach evildoers, we are not simply protecting their trivial old age, we are thereby ripping the foundations of justice from beneath new generations. Here's what Martin Luther King Jr. said about mercy. The first question which the priest and the Levite asked was, "If I stop to help this man, what will happen to me?" But the Good Samaritan reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? And here's what Augustine said about humility. If you plan to build a tall house of virtues, you must first lay deep foundations of humility. So I invite you to come with us on our journey of transformation in making our world a more just, more kind, more humble place, starting with ourselves. Well, stay tuned. Next week, we have a very special guest with some international stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. And remember to act justly, to love kindness, and to walk in humility. This is Rob McKinley signing out for 6-8 Culture.